We're here in Matthew chapter 10. When I was a kid, there were times my family and I would take vacations down to Alabama to see our extended family. And while in some of those vacations, I learned at a very young age the power of some storms that they would get. Whether it was hurricanes or just tornadoes as a result of the hurricanes, whatever it is, they got some doozies of a storm. And one of the vacations, we found out that a tornado had set down less than a half mile of where we were staying. And so we all, buckled down and got down in the hallway and attempted to wait out the storm. Well, for an hour, we literally sat in the hallway and just had to wait while the storm was howling, the hail, the lightning, the wind was blowing, and we didn't even realize. The wind and everything was so loud, we didn't even realize that an entire tree had been pulled up. This is right in our backyard, had been completely pulled up, roots and all, and knocked over. We had no idea. It was that loud. And so after the storm stopped and the tornado left, etc., we still didn't really know because it was still raining and stuff for a while. But that next morning we went out and it's sunny and stuff, and there's the tree. Just gone, roots and all. I mean, I'm pretty sure they just picked the tree back up and put dirt on it. I mean, it's like, and just watered it again. And yeah, it was just like, but it was nuts. It just went right out of the ground. As a kid, though, could you imagine going outside and seeing something like that? Like seeing and experiencing the power of that storm? And I learned that people sort of have a hesitancy in regards to storms because we don't know the damage of what a storm is going to do. I mean, you experience Washington as we have. There's been these wind gusts that come out of the Pacific, and all it is wind. And your tree did just fine experiencing every single previous windstorm. Now it decides it's done. We had a fence, as you guys know, here last year that did just fine for the 20 years that it had been in existence until the wind decided you're done. You don't know when it's going to happen. You approach storms and there's a sense of unease. And you see this have you guys seen what happens in regards to a snowstorm? I mean, when they predict a snowstorm in the state of Washington, people lose their minds. It is hilarious. I mean, Nikki's from Minnesota, and I'm from Colorado, and we both lived in Iowa. And so a storm to freak out about is when they say, we got 8 inches guaranteed. You guys freak out if there's like half an inch coming. Because I hear there could be ice. And I'm like there's not ice anywhere else in the country? Okay. Well, who knew? And so it happens. But you guys know what happens when storms come is people they don't necessarily panic, but they move with passionate enthusiasm towards the gas station and the grocery store. And they buy all the bread and milk and water just in case the storm you get an inch of snow. I mean, it's like, see, the sense of the unknown makes people scared. And in my history as a Christian and background, we usually attach physical storms to the storms of life. And unforeseen situations and trials. And what we hear quite often that we're to rest in the Lord, and we're supposed to rely on the Lord, and we're supposed to, depend on the Lord. And I've heard it even said at sometimes where Christians are to rest in the eye of the storm, because that's where it's safe. And have you guys ever been to the eye of a storm? mean, if you really think about it, I'm talking about like out in the middle of the ocean, not after a hurricane makes landfall. I know some people here from Louisiana, and they're just like, psh, we just go outside in a hurricane. It's not a big deal. But you guys see this? So, see, here's a hurricane. It's the size of Florida. And you're like, just go to the eye of the storm. It'll all be okay. What? So you want me to go where it gets more intense? And there I can sit there. Does that sound like very good advice to you? You know what? When a hurricane comes, what do we want to do? Run! And there's nothing wrong with that. See, when it comes to the storms of life, we like to avoid them, don't we? Come on. Go say, yeah, I like to go to the eye. No, you don't. You insano head. Come on. No one likes to do that. And so, yeah, we get the idea, in the plan of God, that's where it's safe and everything else. But, God doesn't let us get to the eye of the storm very often. A lot of times we're like that little boat out there in the middle of the Mediterranean, and we somehow missed the memo that a storm was coming. And we didn't know that was going to happen in our life, and we go out there, and the storm hits. So you have a choice. Do you paddle towards the eye of the storm, or do you paddle away? Or do you just try to ride out the waves because you realize this storm is going to hit me no matter what, and I really don't know what's going to happen? That's what the Christian life is like. It's a little brutal. You get beat up. Sometimes you never make it to the eye of the storm. Sometimes you just ride the storm out. And after we've done this a couple of times in our life, when we see a storm on the horizon, we get a little nervous. We get a little scared. It's coming again. Man, do I really have to do this again? I just did a hurricane. I just did a snowstorm, God. Come on. Another one? And we get a little uneasy, and we can get a little scared because we don't know what's going to happen with this storm. And we try to, when a storm tries to happen, we oftentimes go to the safest place we can think of. Oftentimes in a storm, it's our house. We try to buckle down in our house, okay? But sometimes, as you guys know, no matter how strong a house is, sometimes it's not strong enough to protect us from the storm. Sometimes in the storms of life, we rest in our friends. And we find out in the storms of life, our friends can't cut it either. Sometimes in the storms of life, we rest and rely on our spouse, and they let us down. Sometimes in the storms of life, we rely on our job. There are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people who relied on their weekly paycheck and are being held hostage and captive by, may I put it so boldly, an incompetent federal government. People, you can't even trust that. And as a result, we can get a little scared. And I say all of this to really build and communicate a truth to you. See, our best made plans can never stop the storms of life. No matter how well we plan, no matter how much money we saved, no matter how big our retirement plan is, no matter how healthy we are, your best plans cannot stop the storms of life. They can't. And if you think they can, just give it a few more years. And in those moments, when those storms hit us, and we look and we are filled with a sense of unease, when we are filled with a sense of fear, and we're like, man, I don't know if my little rickety boat can handle another hurricane. I don't know if my car can handle another ice storm. I don't know if the foundation of my house can handle another earthquake. I don't know, God, and here you are, you're bringing it again. We have a choice. And in those moments, we have a choice to look up in fear at the storm or to rest and brace ourselves to the one that is going to be reliable through the storm. See, God hasn't told us he's going to take away the storm if we trust him. But what God has promised us is if we hold on to him tight enough through the storm, we'll make it through. And if we don't make it through and we happen to die, so that sounds bold and blunt, we'll get to go to heaven and be with him. Sort of a good trade-off. Die and be with Jesus in heaven, or to hold on to him, the safest and most secure object in the midst of the storm. That's our choice here. See, last week we began to study how Jesus called his disciples to meet the spiritual needs of Israel. He called forth his disciples, and he had compassion, and he calls them out, and he sends out the disciples, and he starts to paint a picture. Though, if we're honest, yeah, disciples, you guys are chosen. And you guys, I'm choosing you and I'm sending you out, and you're going to do some incredible things. And you start reading, it's like, if anyone, verse 14 of chapter 10, and if anyone will not receive you or listen to your words, shake off the dust from your feet when you leave that house or town, and truly I say to you, it'll be more bearable on the day of judgment for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah than for that town. And he says, behold, I am sending you as sheep in the midst of wolves. Verse 17, beware of men, for they will deliver you over to the courts and flog you. And he starts saying this. It's like, I don't know if I want to be a disciple. I'm going to have to be drugged before governors, and I might be flogged. Can I take a rain check on this? Let's see how the other 11 disciples handle this before I follow behind. See, Jesus is letting them know there is a storm coming. He's even telling them about the storm. There's going to create a sense of unease. Yes, they're following Jesus, but you want us to walk into that? You're supposed to paddle away from the storm. And Jesus is like, go into it. Okay. And see, and the sense that the disciples are going to be struggling with is they are going to be struggling with a sense of fear and a sense of worry and a sense of anxiousness. And we're going to be able to find, I'm so glad he does this, because as Jesus is sharing and communicating and encouraging his disciples, we can glean some very important truths that can help us in the times of those storms, in the times where we begin to get worried and we begin to fret a little bit and we begin to get a little anxious. We can see how God is building this up. And I hope as a result of these few points that we'll be able to take these home with us. And we'll be able to remind ourselves of these truths. So when we see the storm coming on the horizon, we won't be scared, but we'll turn and rest on the one that can get us through it. So Matthew chapter 10, verses 17 through 31. Let's begin to read. It says, verse 17, beware of men, for they will deliver you over to the courts and flog you in their synagogues. And you'll be dragged before governors and kings for my sake to bear witness before them and the Gentiles. And we're verse 19. And when they deliver you over, do not be anxious about how you are to speak or what you are to say, for what you are to say will be given to you in that hour. Verse 20, for it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. Brother will deliver brother over to death, and the father his child. And children will rise against parents and have them put to death. And you will be hated by all for my name's sake, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. And when they persecute you in one town, flee to the next. I say to you, you have not gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. Yeah. Who wants to sign up and be a disciple now? You can't even depend on your family. You guys get that in verse 21? Brother will deliver brother. You can't even depend on your parents. Father delivers his child. You can't even depend on your children. They will rise up and have their parents be put to death. You'll be dragged before governors and kings. You're going to be going to the courts and be flogged and beaten. I mean, there's a few dangers that he brings out. Verse 17 and 18, he talks about courts and punishment with governors and kings. Verse 21, families will turn against each other. Verse 22, and you will be hated by all for my name's sake. And verse 23, you will be persecuted by entire towns. I want you to imagine how this would make you feel if Jesus tells you this. And don't give me the, I'm a bold, go right in. You're bold up until the fact you start getting beaten for it. And then suddenly the boldness changes. Just be honest. It's not easy. There's going to be a little, okay, Jesus, there's going to be a little fear there. And he drives home this first point. See, what Jesus is saying here, it's like, yeah, it's going to be scary, but remember, the storm, it's not about you. He said in verse 19, when they deliver you over, do not be anxious. Do not worry about how you are to speak or what you are to say. For what you are to say will be given to you in that hour. And I know that when the storms come, your first thought is, what am I going to say? What am I supposed to do? And I can tell you, it's not just here, but in life. When you are worried, am I going to respond the way I'm supposed to respond? We can trust. God is like, it's not about you in the midst of that. I am going to give you the words and the strength and the wisdom to say and do what you're supposed to do if you rely on me. Verse 20, for it is not you who speak, but the Spirit of your Father speaking through you. So if you have a relationship with Jesus Christ, what Jesus is promising this group of disciples, as in the midst of that storm, when you are worried that you won't be able to say the right thing, when you're worried you won't be able to do the right thing, Jesus is telling them, it's not about you. He's saying, the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of your Father, is going to give you wisdom, and He is going to help you through it. You don't have to fear. What a powerful reminder for us as we encounter these storms. When you're sitting there and you're like, there's a friend of mine, and his 9-year-old son has been battling cancer that's been right here behind his eye. And as a parent, you just ask God, why is this happening to me? What am I supposed to do here? How am I supposed to respond? Could you imagine trying to give treatment to a child that is struggling through something like that? Do you do chemo? Do you do radiation? Do you do nothing? What do you do? Do you take out the eye? What do you do? They just chose here a few weeks ago to take out the eye. 9-year-old boy. I sent him a picture of, I don't know if you guys saw the last Thor movie, but he doesn't have an eye now. I was just trying to tell the kid, hey, you know what? You don't have an eye, but the coolest characters in all of movies didn't have eyes either. That's all I got. Because what do you do? How do you work with that kid? How do you talk to the parents? And in their minds, they're sitting there like, I don't even know what the right choice is. But it's not about you. God is going to give you the wisdom as we keep falling back and we keep holding on to the Lord during those storms. Instead of rowing away, instead of paddling, we just hold on to God during the midst of those. He's going to give you the wisdom to make it through. It doesn't say it's going to be easy. That life is going to be a piece of cake just because you follow God. But he's going to help you out. In the midst of those, he is going to guide you, just as he promised these disciples. So look at verse 20. Oh, yeah, we already did that. We'll look at verse 23, okay? And so I want to say that sometimes I've heard it implied where, faith is blind. I just trust God in the midst of my persecution and struggle. You see what they say in verse 23, what Jesus says? When they persecute you in one town, flee to the next. God is saying, it's okay to run. It is. You're not any less bold. You're just using your brain. Seriously, if the town is hostile, don't charge into the middle of the storm for Jesus. Say, I'll see you later in the next town. And head over. See, faith is not some ignorant, blind, just waddling right into it. We gotta use our noggin sometimes too. That's okay. But what God wants is, God wants you, hey, as you struggle through these storms, as you're fighting this, as you're trying to walk through this persecution that's gonna come down, rely and trust. It's not about you. I will give you the words to say. And you might be thinking to yourself in verse 22 and 23, it sounds like everything got really epic at the end. And, they persecute you and brothers are going to turn over brothers and children, their parents, and parents, their children. That sounds really messed up. Could you imagine in your wildest dreams turning over your child to the government for punishment? Come on. Yeah. Okay? We're not going to do it. Unless the child is really, 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 really naughty. You might kick him out the door. Say, calling the police, bucko, you're messed up. But that happens very rarely. Very, very rarely. These are being turned over for their faith. They're being turned over to the government to get beaten and flogged. And so, without spending too much time here, Jesus actually has used this localized sense and actually started to be very prophetic with it. And we'll get onto this in another point. Because you can see that by the last phrase. I say to you, you will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. And you're thinking to yourself, wait a second. If Jesus is the Son of Man and he's already there, that means he's already come. Oh, this is when Jesus comes back again. Got it. We'll explain this more here in some future weeks, but that's why things got a little confusing there for us. But yeah, so Jesus is using this. He's trying to connect with the disciples here, and as he starts pushing this out, he actually starts saying, this is something that future generations can also rely on and rest in, where brothers are turning against brothers and families are turning against families, and it's a horrendous time. So the next one here is, look at verse 24. A disciple is not above his teacher, nor a servant above his master. It is enough for the disciples to be like his teacher and the servant like his master. If they called the master of his house Beelzebub, how much more will they malign those of his household? So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. What I tell you in the dark, say in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim on the housetops. And now Jesus is now trying to connect with them a little more and trying to encourage them during this sort of scary things that he's presenting to them. And he says, hey, I want you to know, realize you are no different than me. If they're persecuting and they have gone after me, they're going to go after you. And Jesus says, straight up, if they have called the master of the house, Beelzebub, which is another way to say Beelzebub, which is another way of saying Lord of the Flies, which was a reference to a pagan god. And do you guys like find that you are really happy when fruit flies and flies come and invade your house? They're what? They're pests. They're annoying. Like if you have a dead rat under your house, you have flies, and you're like, how did you get here, fly? You were disgusting looking. So when they're saying that Beelzebul, when they're attaching Jesus Christ to the Lord of the Flies, what they're saying is you, Jesus, are the Lord of darkness. You are the Lord of pests and death, and God, you are disgusting. Think about that. That is Jesus who has been healing people left and right. We've been covering that for weeks. He's healing and helping everyone. And they're saying, you are the devil. Jesus is like, if it's happening to me, it's going to happen to you. They're going to attack you. And what Jesus says, look at verse 26. He says, so have no fear of them. Yes, they're going to go at you. Yes, you are no different than me. Have no fear of them. And so this is why Jesus says, have no fear of them. He says, for nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. That's his first reason. And so you look at this, and what he's saying is, yeah, the people who are after me, Jesus, the Pharisees, the government of Israel, they're smart. They're working in secret behind the scenes. Everything's going to come out eventually. Everything. It's going to be made known. Do you know those? Maybe this has happened to you guys in your life where somebody has done something against you and you felt completely blindsided by it. Whether it's you just lose your job. I know that happened to, I didn't lose my job, but you're working and out of nowhere, it's like this problem, this giant issue that no one bothered to tell you about suddenly just comes out. And it almost feels like people have been working in secret behind your back. And the next thing you know, you've been kicked out. And you're like, what happened here? And you feel completely blindsided. And what God says is, hey, in those situations, don't worry. It's going to be made known. It's going to be made known here on earth, where they're going to look like complete idiots for getting rid of you. Didn't they, I think Apple did this to Steve Jobs, didn't they, in the 90s? Got rid of him. You're worthless, Steve Jobs. You know nothing. And he comes back and he's like, excuse me, I have this cool thing called an iPod, and I'm going to take over the whole company. What? See ya. That's what he did. Feel like idiots. That's just his angle. I mean, that's just his angle. There's a lot where it comes that God is saying it is going to be made known. We can rest on him. It might not be made known here on this earth. But one day God is going to reveal and expose the plans and the evilness, and he's going to let them know, I knew everything, and you're going to pay for it. God is going to get his vengeance and pay back those who are evil, who are persecuting the good. And he says, what I tell you in the dark, stay in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim on the housetops. He's saying, do not fear, but go up and be a follower of mine boldly. On the house. It's really fun to get up on the roof because everybody who comes into like your neighborhood will honk at you or hey, what are you doing up there? Scraping my roof. Everybody sees you. That's what he's saying. Don't hide. Don't live in fear of what could possibly happen. God is like, I got it all worked out, and it's going to be revealed, and it's going to play out. And I'm going to make sure people know. See, you guys see this cool little map? So this is the United States, and this is Seahawk land. Okay, this is 49er land. This is Bronco land. Can I hear it, amen? There we go. All right. Got a Bronco fan in here. Okay. And so now what happens is if you are a Raider fan, okay, you see how tiny their land is? It's because they stink. Sorry, Dad. Okay, so if a Raider fan finds himself in the middle of Bronco land and is a proud Raider fan, should the Raider fan really be surprised when Bronco fans sort of makes fun of them when they lose? No. Just like how a Bronco fan should not be surprised when his team plays the Seahawks in the Super Bowl and we forget that there's a Super Bowl and we lose miserably, that I'm probably going to get poked fun at a little bit. You guys did great with it. All you had to do was smile, and I knew what you were thinking. But other people are not so nice. But the fact is, when you are a fan in a foreign land, it's going to happen. And so why do Christians think they're any bit different? That'd be silly. It doesn't work. Nope, not yet. Okay, so another thing, that's for the third point I'd go. So I want to say one thing. So I had a conversation with Nikki here a while back where you can approach a situation and you as a decent person, as a Christian individual, someone who is just trying to do the right thing or trying to be nice and loving, and for whatever it is, you're trying to work and help out another person, okay? So we've all been there. But have you ever had your really good deed and your service to somebody be twisted back on you? To the fact that what they're literally saying is, your good work was actually a bad work? Your good work was motivated. You're just arrogant. You're just prideful. You're just the worst Christian I've ever seen. I was trying to love on you. Well, it didn't, and you're bad. See, this happens to Christians quite a few times, quite often. It's happened in my own life, where a good deed will be considered bad. This is the exact same thing that Jesus was doing. Jesus is serving and loving, and he's trying to reach out and give them the good news that there is hope. And people are saying, you are the work of the devil. Your good deeds here are evil, and they're toxic, and they're bad. And that's what's happening. And that happens in our own life regularly, where good stuff we do ends up getting turned back on us, and we had no idea. We're no different. And saying is when that has happened to you and people have used your good stuff and turned it back on you and hit you, don't live in fear and don't be timid, but get up on the rooftop and keep loving and serving others. Because God has your back. He's going to be there, like we talked in verse 1. Don't be anxious. He's going to give you the words to say. He's going to give you the right action. Yeah, we might have to use our brain and approach things differently a little bit, but don't be scared of trying to love and serve others because you don't know what's going to happen. We can't do it. Last point. Look at verse 28. He says, and do not fear those who kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather, fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? Not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father? But even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore, you are of more value than many sparrows. And everything has been building up to this point, this sort of final statement on why we don't need to fear. So he says in verse 28, after reading this is actually probably one of my, not favorite, but this sort of made me laugh. So he says, don't fear those who can kill the body. As we know, anybody under the sun can kill the body of another person. God's like, don't fear them. Don't live in fear of those who can kill the body. Because, they kill the body, but they can't even touch your soul. They can't even touch it. But he says, rather fear him who can destroy for both soul and body in hell. And so what Jesus is saying here is don't fear men. Don't fear women. Don't fear people who can physically harm you. No, fear the one who can destroy body and soul in hell. And if we think about it, we're like, that's sort of scary. God can destroy body and soul. He can destroy it. And so you're sitting here and you have this huge view of don't fear scary men, fear scary God. And then in verse 29, he starts talking about sparrows. He literally goes from you have this image of God as a big, scary person who can destroy bodies and souls in hell like it's not even a big deal. And then he starts talking about a sparrow. Aw, I like birds. We had like 30 birds in our yard yesterday. Don't know what they're doing. But I will say, if they are there, when our grapes get ripe, there's going to be 30 dead birds. War is coming, okay? And it won't be me that does it. Nikki will be the one leading the charge against the birds. That's how bad it is, okay? So all these birds in the yard, but they're really cute. Aren't they? We have little hummingbirds that go and like fly and drink their sugar water from our window. And we're just like, oh, it's so cute. But they're really tiny. You can kill a hummingbird with a fly swatter. Like a sparrow. They're like little hand. They're tiny little things. And this is what I think is like one of the neatest reasons why we can rest in God is yes, God has the power to destroy both body and soul. He has full power, but this is what he's building up to. So he says, are not two sparrows sold for a penny? So he's now equivalating. So this sparrow, I mean, we don't really have a sparrow trade, in the U.S. They're really not sold too often. So I thought they're like goldfish. You know what I'm saying? Goldfish. You can buy goldfish for $0.10. You can have people give you goldfish. People swallow goldfish. The goldfish are $0.10 a dozen. Our church back in Colorado, we had a leaky roof at some point, and instead of fixing the leaky roof, they got a swimming pool. I'm not saying this is the right way to handle this, but it dripped water. And so that water being dripped through the tar and everything and the wood and the mold. And so the water dripping into this kiddie pool is like brown. And my dad got sick of it, and so he brings in goldfish and dumps them into the pond. That's my dad, okay? So if you want any explanation for why I am me, that's probably some of the reason, okay? So he goes and he dumps goldfish in this pond. You know what? Goldfish, they just lived, and they just drank the dirty roof water. And goldfish are just those, it's just a tiny little, just a goldfish. That's just your mentality. And so here he is like, yeah, are not two sparrows sold for a penny? Sparrows are tiny, little, pointless birds that everybody can get whenever they want, and they're really cheap. There's absolutely no value to a sparrow. Somebody's car alarm? You guys don't hear it? Oh, man, I thought I was getting really sick. I started hearing things. If that is your car, you can, everyone press their panic buttons and try to get that taken care of. Just joking, don't do that. So, he says, are not two sparrows sold for a penny? So he's literally like, these sparrows are not that important, okay? And this is what God says about those tiny little cheap birds that everybody has and everybody can get, and there's not really that important. And he says, and not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. As in God, the one who can destroy body and soul in hell, knows when the teeny little sparrow dies. But he doesn't stop there. We're like, yeah, but God cares more about the sparrows than me. Look at verse 30. Even the hairs of your head are all numbered. And it gets easier over time. He keeps track of that. He keeps track of the falling hairs on your head. Men, we can take comfort in that as we lose our hair. And ladies, as I know some of you, when you have babies, and then like your hair's like invincible, and then when you have your child, you literally lose hair like it's no tomorrow. You like lose a pet, every baby on your head. I don't even know how that works, okay? I don't. But literally, he knows, and he tracks the smallest detail. Hair, it's just here, I'm gonna pull a piece of hair out. Oh, that was easy. Okay, there it is. Oh boy, I'm back. Okay, he knows every single one of our hairs on your head. Yeah, that one, that great, scary, big, powerful God who can conquer and defeat storms like it's not even a big deal, knows how many pieces of hair is on your head. And he says, don't fear, because you are of more value than the sparrows. Don't fear the storms, because God knows every single strand of hair. He knows everything about you. He knows when the sparrow falls down in the field, and you are of more value. We don't have to fear because God is with us in the storms. It doesn't say he's going to take them away. It doesn't say they're going to get easy. But he's right there with us every step of the way. He knows exactly what you're going through. It says, we preached on this here like a few months ago in Matthew chapter 6, verse 26. And Jesus says this, okay? He says, look at the birds of the air. This is Matthew 6:26 if you want to check it out later. Look at the birds of the air. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? And which of you by anxious can add a single hour to his span of life? And why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow, neither toil nor spin. Yet I tell you, even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is alive and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? Therefore do not be anxious, saying, what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear? Verse 33 says, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. And that's Matthew 6:26 through 34. Are you not of more value than these birds that God takes care of on a regular daily basis? And the answer is yes. See, because what they didn't realize at the time here when Jesus is reaching and sending the disciples out, and he's trying to comfort them. See, those disciples were so important. And just like we are to Jesus, that Jesus Christ went to the cross and died on the cross to rescue us from the greatest storm that each one of us face. And that is sin in our life. Sin wages an unstoppable war, and we cannot escape its power. We can't ever get to the eye of the storm. We are stuck and trapped and will one day perish. And Jesus Christ steps in and he rescued us from that storm. See, he values you so much that he was willing to die to rescue you from that storm. So when you are fighting the storms you are today, remember, it's not about you. But God and his work through you, he is there. He's working inside you. He's working through you. He's going to give you the words to say and the wisdom as we hold on to him as tight as we can. He says, realize you are no different. Do not approach life from, oh, well, nothing bad should ever happen to me because I'm trusting God. No, are you kidding? Jesus is like, I went through hardship. Don't think life is easy. Because I know as Christians and people, we can often attach the fact that we have a hardship in our life. We're like, oh, I must have done something wrong. Probably not. It's probably just life just smacking you. And if life attacked Jesus, you know full well it's going to attack us. He says, you are no different. Jesus went through storms and you are as well. And some storms are going to be bigger than others. And it's going to really look, as we look over this, some people go through a lot harder storms. And sometimes we look at everybody else's storms and we're like, their storms are easy. We can't say that because you're not them in their boat in their storm. We're us in our boat in our storm. You are no different. And he says, rest. The last point is rest in the one who knows you. God will bring everything to light. He knows what is best for you. He knows the exact number of every hair on your head, and you are of so much value to him. He's not going to let you down. So just hold on to him. Just rest in him. And when that storm hits you, and you don't have the answers, and you're like, man, I don't know what I'm going to do with my job. I don't know what I'm going to do here. I don't know what's going on with my friends, my kids, my family. I don't know. God, help me through this storm. Get up that morning and say, God, help me. And put your pants on. One foot, one leg at a time. Get your shoes on and walk out and take that storm head on. Because God has your back. And he's walking with you. And get up on that rooftop and take it on.